It looks like this Air India Boeing 787 didn't have enough power. My friends, good evening. Takeoff from Ahmedabad, India. We're heading south. Ambient temperature close to 40 degrees. We have this Boeing 787 taking off to go to Gatwick. It's not at the limits of its range. It can go much farther. I don't have the documents in front of me, but I think it would be able to go all the way to New York without stopping. In any case, it's going to Gatwick. It's full of passengers, roughly. There are 242 people on board. So people, well, that means humans, that's heavy, and that also means luggage too. You know, the more people we have, the more luggage there is. Fuel, probably the tanks were maybe half full, right? And so it's going to line up for takeoff. It takes off roughly towards the southwest. Questions have been raised by the online community saying maybe it took off from the middle of the runway. Because if you want, you have the apron where the planes are parked, and then when they want to go to the end of that runway, they can't do it directly. There's no taxiway that allows them to do it. So what they have to do is go onto the runway, taxi up it, get to the end, turn around on a turnaround area. It's just a part of the runway that's wider, turn around, and then they have the full length, which is 3,500 meters. It seems that it took off from the beginning of the runway, even though Flight Radar 24 shows it taking off from the middle of the runway. That's simply because the coverage isn't very good. Sometimes the ADS-B coverage isn't very good, so there are some missing points. And for a flight of such length, it would have been crazy for the pilots to take off from the middle of the runway, because they would have had only 1,900 meters. But, I mean, we still have a plane that crashed. So we still have something that wasn't optimal, that wasn't nominal. So obviously we have to analyze all the angles. Donc, another thing we see is that there are a few videos that have come out showing this aircraft in trouble, in the sense that it's having difficulty gaining altitude. The entire flight lasted 27 seconds, so we have an aircraft, which I want to say took off, but maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, because when you have an accident that happens within 30 seconds after takeoff, it means the plane never really truly took off. It never really got properly airborne. It never really had the ability to climb, to take flight. We're just being carried forward by momentum on an almost ballistic trajectory. It was able to lift off the ground. You know, that's easy with ground effect and all that. It can always gain a certain altitude. But it stopped there. It wasn't in sustained flight. And so it moved forward and crashed. The casualties on the ground are very high because the area is densely populated. And so we have an aircraft with 242 people on board, and apparently everyone died. There is talk of one survivor, but that's still something that needs to be confirmed in the coming hours. In addition, the initial report says about 50 deaths on the ground, so we're not far from 300 victims. For this tragedy, which is still a major tragedy, it's something quite significant. Maybe we've become unaccustomed to it nowadays, thanks to maybe now isn't the time to talk about it. But maybe thanks to the evolution of air safety, we don't have these tragedies anymore. For example, in the 1970s, we used to have 2 or 3 a year. Today, we're less used to this kind of thing. It only happens once every few years. By the way, the Boeing 787, this is the first accident since it entered service, which was not pushed back at all. There were quite a few issues with batteries overheating, batteries catching fire, with the software, all that. There were still some difficult moments, but it never compromised its safety. It's a plane that's generally considered very safe. So, what do we see? I was saying we see a plane taking off, it pitches up, leaves the ground, so it rises a little bit, not by much, right? We'll see later, but I think we're talking about probably 200, 300 feet, not much more. And then it's going to come back down to the ground. And it's not going to come back quickly. It's not like it stalls and drops like a stone. That's not it. It's going to come back down in a relatively slow descent. We're talking about roughly 475 feet per minute. That's the figure given by Flight Radar, by their analysts. less than 500 feet per minute, so it's a gradual descent with the landing gear down. The plane was pitching up while staying level, and it crashes into a building, specifically the cafeteria where those students were, and that's where it causes a lot of damage on the ground. So, the Indian authorities are only just beginning to assess the extent of the human toll. So, what is it? What stands out? What can we say today? Well, listen, I was watching the videos, two videos that seem critical to me. Maybe others will come out later, and certainly others will come out. But there are two videos that are very interesting from a technical point of view. There's one that shows those last seconds of flight. It's someone who filmed from a building. And you can see the plane, in fact, pitching up, slowly coming back down toward the ground. This video is interesting, even if it doesn't teach us much that we don't already know, because we can simply see that the plane crashed, which we already know. So, that's not any special information. But the sound is interesting because you can hear some cracking noises at one point, plus the sound isn't very loud. So yes, the Dreamliner is a plane that isn't very noisy by nature, but not to that extent. That's what's... You can hear it, you can hear the engine noise, but it seems relatively quiet, so that's something to keep in mind. Another very interesting video is from a surveillance camera. It's a video of rather poor quality. Why? Because it was zoomed in to see the plane, because it's probably a wide-angle camera, and they had to zoom in to catch the plane, so the quality is very average. What do we see? We see this aircraft accelerating on the runway. Normally, at this stage, it lifts its nose to take off, and this video will follow it. This camera will follow it until the crash. So, this one will film the entire flight, if you will. And what are we going to see? We're going to see something interesting. I'm going to share with you some stills that I took. I took some, what you call them, screenshots from the video. I put them into Photoshop, and I started playing with filters, with color filters. There's something we're going to see that you can see in the video. Actually, that's because I started from this observation, right? And when we watch the video, I'd like you to compare. You see that at the moment the plane lifts off, there are two things. There's a cloud of dust behind. Okay, because the area of the runway is dusty, isn't it? And we also have a kind of heat shimmer that you can see behind all the planes taking off, behind their engines. Now I'd like you to compare the left engine and the right engine. What do you notice? What we notice is that it seems that the left engine is lifting up some dust. That means when the plane pitches up and this engine points toward the ground, there's dust being lifted up. You can also see that once the dust starts to disappear because the plane is gaining altitude, you start to see a bit of heat shimmer, right? Behind it, there's a bit of heat, right? Heat shimmer behind the engine. But on the right engine, you don't see anything like that. So the right engine, it seems, is generating less thrust, or maybe no thrust at all. Maybe it has failed, broken down. By the way, the dust cloud, which is very strong, usually happens if a plane pitches up but doesn't climb fast enough. That means it's going to stay close to the ground for a few more seconds because it doesn't have enough thrust to climb very quickly. So what happens is it pitches up, so the engine that's providing power will now end up pointed toward the ground and close to it. And what it's going to do is, for a few seconds, it will have the chance to blow quite a lot of dust and create the phenomenon we see in the video. So, of course, I have to be very careful with my wording. I'm just going by appearances with the limited data we have right now. I'm not suggesting that there was an engine failure or anything like that. I'm analyzing the available evidence at this stage. Later it could be confirmed, it could be disproved, and anyway, I'll deny ever having told you that. In any case, we have our plane pitching up. It's gaining a bit of altitude. And so, if we assume that there was, let's say, an engine failure, let's say the right engine, as the images seem to suggest, was out. Well, what can we say from there? We can say two things. That the landing gear wasn't retracted, the landing gear stayed out. Now, in an engine failure, the main concern, let's say, of a pilot who has an engine failure is that the landing gear must be retracted to reduce drag. Especially since today we're not departing from an airport where it's -5 degrees. It's almost 40 degrees. The hotter it is, well, the less dense the air is, if you will. And in that case, the air supports the wings much less. So there's less lift, all other things being equal. And secondly, what happens is that the engines, since it's hot, are less efficient. So if we lose an engine and on top of that we're loaded and all that, it's true that we're gradually moving toward a zone where things may stop being sustainable. You see what I mean? So potentially the plane pitches up. The pitching up of the plane suggests a normal rotation, the kind you might see on a normal day, a takeoff with two engines. Whereas here we're probably taking off on one. So probably here this takeoff is a bit more aggressive. And then the landing gear hasn't been retracted. At this point we're lacking energy. So our aircraft stays very nose up. At first it leaves the ground because it benefits from ground effect. It stays very nose up. It won't be able to gain any more altitude. It won't be able to pick up speed. And what happens? Well, while staying as nose up as possible, it gently starts coming back down toward the ground. And at that moment we have an impact in a built-up area. There have been theories suggested by various people saying takeoff without the flaps. Well, that's a possibility. It has happened. It was quite common at a certain time. You know, we had the Spanair case, which was mentioned on this channel, by the way. We had other planes too, but they were mostly older generation aircraft. But it's very difficult to make that kind of mistake with the 787 because it has an electronic checklist, and that checklist shows how the performance was calculated. And if the flaps are not exactly where they should be, it will show that it's incomplete. Plus, there's a takeoff configuration alarm that will sound very loudly if the throttles are advanced for takeoff while the flaps are retracted. So it's a mistake that could happen. But in my opinion, the probability I associate with it is like with all mistakes, you know. We can put them all on the table and then we assign a factor. That means we assign a probability. That mistake in itself is not impossible. Except that, given the barriers that make that mistake hard to make, we're going to assign it a probability. An extremely low probability at this stage unless there is other information. Especially since in the phone video we see the plane moving away before the accident. Well, we see a shadow on the front of the wing. We see that the leading edge slats seem to be extended anyway. Even though, in reality, it's very difficult, at least from that distance, to assess the position of the flaps during takeoff. Because between a plane with the flaps retracted and one with them set to 5, for example, at flap setting 5, to the naked eye from a few hundred meters away, the difference is almost invisible. It's very, very hard to see. For landing, you can see them clearly because they extend much farther. During takeoff, it's different. They're only extended a little. And so it's very, very hard to judge from pixelated videos like the ones circulating right now. Anyway, my friends, that's about all we can say tonight with the information available. I'll come back in the next few days if more information emerges that sheds light on this tragedy. Thank you for your loyalty to this channel. Don't hesitate to subscribe and like to get notifications when updates arrive. See you very soon.